have you seen more success stories in it also versus the ones that have not been successful also doing it?
I've seen it fail. But the failure is not because they borrowed money to buy real estate. They failed because the execution was wrong or the source of the payment was miscalculated.
Would you say that Taguig has taken out Makati, or Makati is still number one in terms of glamour from a residential standpoint also?
Not Taguig as a whole, but no, I think BGC is a condominium area. So it won't beat the Forbes Dasma kasi in a Forbes, in a Dasma, you need at least 1 billion pesos to be able to enter that community. So Makati, the Forbes Dasma will still be higher ranking because in the Philippines, mas tayo house and lot community. Vis-a-vis Singapore, where it's mostly or Hong Kong, mostly condominiums.
Why do you borrow money for property? I wanna know your logic behind that. Has it been successful all the time, or if it wasn't, when did it not become so successful for you?
Using the rich dad poor dad approach, no? You have a rich one, poor one. Si poor one lumaki sa isang environment na bawal magkautang. Ayoko magkautang, that is a bad impression for me. And because I don't want to utang, I don't want to have a loan, I want to have a clear mind, I would just rent. Si rich one, medyo nakikinig kay marvingermo, medyo open-minded.
Perfect, Carl D. Okay.
He explored borrowing from the bank to buy a townhouse, sabihin natin, or a condo unit. So both of them are paying monthly amortization. Si renter maybe 35,000. Si na may utang sa bangko 45,000. Si poor Juan, for the first 10 years, wala siyang utang. Basta nagbabayad lang ako ng rent. After 10 years, what happens? He gets nothing. The whole 10 years na binayad sa renta, nawala. But he's happy kasi wala siyang utang. Si rich one, for the first 10 years, he worked hard, he struggled because he has to pay for his monthly amortization. Iba rin ang mental mode niya. He has to work super hard, very focused. No Starbucks, no expensive restaurants because I have a loan to pay. What happened, Marvin, after 10 years? Dun sa umutang sa bangko.
He has an asset?
Bayad na yung property niya. And he can enjoy it for the next 10, 20, 30 more years. I hope that's a good story to clearly show the power of borrowing money to buy a property.
Have you seen more success stories in it also versus the ones that have not been successful also doing it?
I've seen it fail. But the failure is not because they borrowed money to buy real estate. They failed because the execution was wrong or the source of the payment was miscalculated. Meaning, I'm paying 45,000 at nahirapan ako magbayad. Kaya nag-fail. Kasi maybe I lost my job or I did not factor na madadapa ako once in a while. Nung nadapa, he was not able to have some emergency fund to pay for the monthly. So nag-fail yung loan. Or too much leverage, which we saw it also in our mga kaibigan natin sa overseas. Minsan, ang lalakas ng loob nila. Grabe. Sabi ko nga, you leverage harder than me. I do it so cautiously. So usually, pag medyo high leverage, tapos na-affect yung source of income, doon nag-fail. But on the property side, as long as you buy a property following a good framework, meaning maganda yung supply and demand, maganda yung pricing, you are clear who your target renter is, and you are good in executing it, advertising, it should work naman. Tapos patience lang. And then meron kang buffer na pag nadadapa ka minsan, you can just hurdle through it. For example, there's a possibility na if you're using rent to pay for your monthly amortization, may mga months na wala kang rent. So what do? If you're prepared, you say, hindi, temporary lang to. I'll just use my own money, savings, for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 months na wala akong tenant, then meron na naman, happy na naman.
Why do you borrow money for property? And the way you answered it was basically this: you borrow money because over the long term, you get an asset. Is that parang what you're trying to inject to the audience? Versus if you don't borrow money for property, you end up not getting anything.
Okay, I guess you're right, Marvin. No? If you are like me, na you don't have this big amount of money, then you have no choice but to borrow money and slowly pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you use the self-liquidating model, which is the exciting one, wherein you acquire a property that will have rental, siyang magbabayad ng utang. And eventually, for example nga, you buy a property, and if you do your mathematics correctly, yung utang mo 50,000 kunwari, and yung rental mo 50,000. So the tenant is now paying for your utang. The tenant is now buying the property for you. You just need patience kasi you need 10 years, 15 years. No, I do 10 years. You let the 10 years run, property fully paid. Somewhere in the middle, you buy another one. Let the tenant pay for it, let it run 10 years, you acquire the second property. You bought a third property, borrowed from the bank, let the third tenant pay for it again. After 10 years, you have 3 properties. So imagine doing that over the next 15 years or 20 years while you are actively strong, working. That's more or less age 30 hanggang 50. Imagine when you reach 50, everything is now fully paid. Imagine mo yung passive income that you're gonna get first 20 years of your life. Very powerful, Marvin. And that's how you acquire property, by acquiring properties na may kasamang tao na magbabayad dun sa utang.
That's a very, very good example of leverage, no? That when you borrow, I like what you said, that you study it also very, very well, that the rental income or the passive income should somehow supplement the capital that you placed in, or at least the liabilities if you borrowed it from the bank. You said something very interesting na you only do 10 years in terms of loan. Why not 5? Why not 15? Why not 20? What's the logic behind that? I'm sure people in the comment section are very curious about that. Bakit si Carly 10 years? Is there something very significant about that?
My lucky number kasi is 10. Okay, first, I usually do a 50-50 loan. 50% of my own money, 50% I borrow. So kung makita mo, you don't borrow too much. Just enough, no, na hindi ganun kabigat yung monthly, kayang bayaran ng tenant mo.
And that's a very, very good principle, kasi that means already that you also have, even if you're borrowing, I think that's a true form of leverage, because even if you're borrowing, you also have the capital to be able to inject in that property. And like what you said also, the monthly of that will be lesser talaga kasi you place a larger amount of equity.
Pag 80% leverage, most of the time, kulang yung binabayad ng tenant. Okay lang, but kung kulang, you will have to top up. Yan yung ginagawa ng mga friends natin sa overseas with a high salary, high excess. They have enough to top up. So parang ang mindset nila is, kaysa antayin ko pa na mabuo ko tong pera, i-go ko na, simulan ko na. So that's also a good strategy if you have high excess every month. So I don't do that kasi I feel it's risky from a financial point of view. Or not risky, it's more aggressive. I prefer a more conservative approach. 10 years is a number na parang magmamatch dun sa renter's payment. Pag 5 years to pay, the monthly amortization is quite high. You will have to top up every month. And it becomes, if you are not high income, like me, low income, it becomes a big burden. Parang stress out ka. Diba? 15 years naman, I feel, konti lang binawas sa monthly, pero 5 taon yung dinagdag.
Talaga? So the jump from 10 to 15 sa monthly niya, not as, parang you don't feel it as much anymore, parang ganun.
Yeah, and personally lang, I guess I analyze myself, parang if you keep on playing the 15-year game, mas mahaba lang siya. And since kaya ko na siyang bayaran in 10 years, I went for 10 years. It's been my parang formula na 10 years to pay. You also have to understand that there's also a power in installment. Ako, magagalit yung mga ayaw sa utang sa akin. Magalit yung mga Dave Ramsey's, no? But this is just, I'm not encouraging you to borrow money, but I'm just sharing with you to educate yourself more about the power of using the bank's service, the bank's money. When you loan a housing loan from the bank, if everything falls into place, it should have a mortgage redemption insurance. Meaning, if something happens to you, the loan is fully paid. And for your beneficiary to enjoy. Ganun siya ka-powerful. So, imagine mo if you have 100 millions of loan and then ma-deads ka bigla. If all of those have mortgage redemption, then you even leverage your death. Kasi pag deads mo, lahat ng property bayad yun. That's something that you have to factor, no? Kasi yun nga, unfortunately, some people, they perceive talking about death as something na morbid or ano. But technically, it happens to everybody. It's a matter of timing lang. And might as well leverage it, di ba? Or plan around it.
That's a very good way of talking about it or thinking about it. Di ko naisip yun. And it's a good way also, people get life insurance for certain aspects of their finances, and this one naman parang protects also the property that they have, and that they don't have to worry about it also if something will happen to the person who's actually paying for it also and buying it as well. Before we move on to the next one, I want to say this. Ito naman, I'll share some approaches also na pwedeng pag-isipan ng ibang tao. Another thing is they can take a longer loan, for example 15 years, but because they're paying less on a monthly basis, they just save that. And then they do lump sums every time. Kasi every time people would lump sum also larger amounts, it goes straight to the principal and then you don't pay interest off of that. Pero yung difference lang nun, kailangan mo maging discipline kasi nagiging problem ng ibang tao when they have extra money. Ay hindi, extra money naman yan. Nagagastos or hindi rin siya napupunta dun sa allocation talaga na yun. But if you're disciplined enough also, you can do lump sums every year, and then it can reduce yung amount also that total na nababayaran mo. And then instead of actually paying it for 15 years, you could maybe get it for 7 or 8 years only, as long as you're very disciplined also on doing those lump sums as well.
So Marvin shared a permutation of the strategy, and I'm gonna permutate it a bit more. If you get a lump sum, darating isang point wherein you will now think again, do I pay off my loan, which is running perfectly, or do I use this lump sum to buy another property? Another property and let it run again. So yun yung mga toss up mo. So it's really more of a mental game, just like everything in business or in life. You really have to think about all the pros and cons in your mind, no? So for us, Marvin, share ko lang din to all your audience na if we get a lump sum, we try to keep it so we can acquire another thing that pays for itself. For those who are listening and you find this super interesting, I can deep dive and talk about this in a coaching session. I do a private one-to-one coaching. Just search lang in Facebook Carl D Private Coaching and it will come out. So I do private coaching sa mga gusto mag-deep dive. And I also have a 10-hour workshop, Marvin. Kung itong session na to, it's only 1 hour, you find it enticing. We have recorded 10 of these sessions, 10 hour. We talk about everything from commercial property, 1 hour of all commercial, 1 hour of all residential, 1 hour of build and sell, 1 hour of leverage, borrowing from the bank. 1 hour yun, puro utang pinag-uusapan, and how to risk management. We also talk about risk management. We talk about farming, we talk about foreclosure, we talk about the right mindset of a real estate. May isang session tayo, 1 hour, all mindset lang. Kasi you have to prepare muna yung foundation of the mindset before you go to the actual execution. So for that 10 hour is recorded. Just search ESME Carl D and it will come out.